Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode this week with Johannes Lindman. Hey Johannes, welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
So today we're going to talk about change. I mean, it can be any type of change, like a team level, personal level, or even organizational level. And we want to explore that change process so that we understand the tools, the techniques, the tips that you learned back then that you still apply today. So tell us that story, Johannes.
Yes. Actually, I broke the rule of just having one team. I tried to have several teams, so but that's a part of the change. So we had a typical situation, lots of individuals that had super skills, and they needed to share them because we had bottlenecks in people. What do you call it? Resources. Well, you know what I mean. So, and they were in separate teams, and we understood we need to start working on our competence exchange and become less dependent on certain individuals. So I suggested, how about trying mob programming? That's a fantastic way to fast share knowledge. And this was, of course, a major new way of working for them. Wow, what is this? This can't work. This must be inefficient. All the ideas. So, and the teams look at me, okay, but one team said, yeah, let's try. How do we do it? And I explained the basics. I did, though, forget to tell them how long they should try. And the other team just say, okay, we will humor you, we'll try. And so one team, they tried for 5 minutes and said, this sucks, and we don't do it anymore. And they were kind of annoyed, but they had all decided before, and I just let it go. The other team, on the other hand, they started mob programming at 9 o'clock, and they continued. It became 11 o'clock, and they had lunch. They continued in the afternoon, and they said when the day was over, oh, this was fantastic, but we can't do it all day. And I just said, well, it wasn't the intention that you should do it all day. I was kind of hoping you take some bugs in the morning and doing it until lunch, more or less. So try to zoom in on how long you should do this new practice we're trying out. Yeah, so they start realizing, talked about that, and they decided a schedule that they do 1 or 2 hours a day and tried it for a week or two. And the team that had rejected this idea, they were still no, that's not for us. We do it individual work. We separate our tasks and so. And but this team that started working with this new way of working, they just kept getting stronger and better and faster and being able to fix things, and they had more fun. They started drinking beer on Fridays. So it was a great team building, and it was very perfect suit for them. It was perfect for them, and they enjoyed it. And so now the other team, which I hadn't commented on that they didn't want to do it, I just let them. Don't. I won't bug you. You try. You hear me. And after a while, they got more and more curious, and then some of them started to, well, maybe we should try again. And then they said, okay, well, some strong individuals said no. And then I tried, could you try to pair program, some of you? That's a minor version of that. And they started doing that. And I think 6 months later, there was still one guy who refused to cooperate or mob programming or pair programming. But I installed this new way of working. For one team, it worked fantastic with mob programming. The other team saw the benefits and made their version by doing it pair programming. And I was still happy because the goal was to start sharing competences and not working so much individually. And the result was fantastic. They solved new bugs, and it became much faster, and all things you would expect from a team working more collaborative. So that was a change I'm kind of proud of, that I didn't harass the team that refused my great idea. And I also had the luck that one team really caught on to this. That was not me, just giving them the pointers.
So that excuse me. So there's two lessons there that I would like to get your thoughts on. Of course, the first one is where do we put our emphasis and our focus? Because it's very easy as change agents to think, no, we should focus on the teams that don't have it or don't want it, right? Let's work with them. But you took a different approach. You said, no, let's, you don't want to do it, don't do it. And you supported the team that was actually doing it and answered their questions, helped them reflect and so on. So that's the first lesson. Like, how do you see that in your work? Like, is that something you try to do all the time? Is that something that just happened by chance here? How do you look at this, focusing on those that want it versus those that don't want it?
Well, I was a bit lucky there and then, but I use this experience quite often now because I see it like a set-based design or whatever. We try something on several places, and you don't have to make it fly everywhere in one. If you find something that here it takes root, you grow that, and that becomes a role model for others, and let them shine and see the beauty of that. And then you encourage people again to try again in another way. So absolutely, it's so easy just to focus on that. I would like people to do it like this, and then I help them who doesn't seem to understand, if you're doing quote science here, because they don't want to, we don't see the benefit. But if I can't sell it or explain it, let them see what other people can do then. So find somewhere you can grow this ability, whatever change you want to do, and then have that as a showcase. Show them. If you can't teach them, show them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very powerful, right? Because I bet some of those developers were like, hey, but they're having beer.
Yeah, that part they wanted to be in on. Yeah.
So the other aspect, the other lesson that was very interesting for me is that when you went back to the team that had at first said that, no, they don't want it, when you went back to that team, you didn't necessarily insist, let's do it or whatever. You just say, hey, how about this other thing, right? Like pair programming. And this, I think for me, is the ability that having a clear goal, so sharing competencies in this story, right? Having a clear goal allows us as change agents to kind of adapt our approach, right? Like we are not stuck to mob programming because that's not the only way to share experience and share competencies.
No, you shouldn't fall in love with your tool because it's the outcome you're after. And if you have some experience or a wide palette of tools, it's easier, and it's not the right way to do things always. Because another what you call it, a trap people fall into, if they have found one tool like mob programming, they think that this is a tool that solves all problems all the time for everybody. Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver. It depends on what you're trying to fix, but you're still building a house.
Yeah, absolutely. Falling in love with one tool is definitely an anti-pattern that it's very easy for us to fall into. Like, for example, even Scrum, right? Like, yep. I know there's a lot of, let's call it, there's a lot of sarcastic comments about Scrum Bot. And that's okay. Scrum Bot is a symptom, and it might be an anti-pattern in itself, but it's also potentially a symptom of being able to adapt, right? Being able to understand what the current situation is asking for. And I think that this falling in love with the tool, which I don't know if it happened to you with extreme programming, it certainly happened to me with Scrum, falling in love with one tool, it actually detracts from our own personal agility to adapt to the situation and to the change that is required at that time.
Yeah. And it's getting hard nowadays because previously you always could say that let's start with Scrum Basic, the Shu-Ha-Ri, because it's a good starting point. And if we're still doing Scrum by the book 6 months later, we're probably doing something wrong because we should adapt and change. But my problem now when I'm out coaching or Scrum Master, that people, they know Scrum from the beginning. We can't start with Shu. They are somewhere else already. And then I need to figure out what's the common ground with new people. I knew what was the basics. So we were starting in some Ha area already. So it's a bit trickier now. It was easy before when you could say, let's do it by the book, start there, and then we take it from there and change it.
Okay, so now I want to hear your comments on this. So when I'm asked, so where do you start if you go into a new team, and what are the things you want to make sure are there when you start working with the team? So I usually say that I only need 2 things to be there. I say that the first thing and most important is, of course, the retrospectives, because if we aren't retrospecting, we're not improving, we're not learning, we're not getting better at whatever we are doing. And then the second thing is short time boxes. And that I say because it forces us to collect feedback even if we think we're not ready for it. And if you put these two together, like short time boxes and retrospectives, and if we do this deliberately and we want to learn, of course, that's an important part, then we will eventually come up with something that is very close to either Scrum or extreme programming or a mix of both or even Kanban. It doesn't really matter at that time. What do you think about that?
I think that's a generally good idea, but since I read your book, I would start sometimes with metrics. Do you know how we can measure that what we're doing? Because sometimes I find like mainframe crews, they have no idea what Agile is or retrospectives, but they work together like the last 4 decades, and they have retrospectives every coffee break, more or less, and they are working really short iterations without knowing it. So then it would be a bit strange to come up and say, oh, we should have a retrospective. So it's not always applicable. But so if you see that they maybe could handle this feedback loop because they are tight and learning all the time and they are kind of quick, look at, do we know what we actually are driving to? Can we visualize the metrics and see that we are doing what we think we're doing and prove that and start from that? So I would say that I would look for how can we see our progress and start from that.
That's brilliant addition. Thank you for that. I think I will steal it.
Oh, well, I thought it was in your book, NoEstimates.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.